So hello everyone from Green-Mopeds in London. So today we're going to follow up our ride review of the Silence S02 LS with a static review, and we've put it next to its bigger brother, the S01. And as we normally do, we're going to go around the bike, show you some of the features of it and do a comparison to the S01, and hopefully that will help you make an informed decision. So let's get to it. So to talk a little bit about the brand itself first. So Silence is out of Spain, and they are one of the few, if the only, European manufacturer who only does electric motorbikes. Only. Obviously now with the 2035 plan of zero emissions from the exhaust of motorcycles, there will be probably new companies starting up. Some of the traditional players will go into this market, but at the moment Silence is really the only one. Piaggio have the Vespa Electrica, BMW have the C Evolution, which is 3 times this price. But Silence have got 3 models, okay, and they've actually been around since 2011, so not a new company in that respect, but new here, okay. So I'm comparing the S01 to the S02 just to sort of give you a bit of context, but the S01 here has a 9 kilowatt rear hub-mounted motor. That's 9 kilowatts max on a 14-inch Pirelli tired wheel, and it has this 40-kilo trolley system for the battery. Okay, and the battery, as you can see here, is 5.6 kilowatt hours. Okay, and that gives this bike a WMTC rating of 91 miles. Okay, which is, if true, by far the furthest range of any of the bikes that we do, and most bikes out there, especially in a removable format. Okay, so they have thought about this, still making it convenient while giving you good range. Okay, what you'll see are some of the things that are carried across from the S01 to the S02, or maybe it's vice versa. So things like it's got CBS, and all 1.5kw bikes have to have CBS or ABS. Okay, so CBS is where you have the 2 leads coming in and out of the front caliper, and that also goes to feed the rear caliper at the same time. It splits the force to basically slow you down. If you look here, the S02 also has the CBS. So there aren't many 50cc bikes that have CBS. Okay, but obviously what's happening is that Silence have produced the S02 in these 3 guises, and one of the guises is a 1.25cc. Okay, and therefore they had to have it. So why make anything different? They've sort of standardized. Okay, so on the S02 there are actually 3 variations. There's the S02 standard, or HS as they call it, high speed. So that is essentially taking that 5.6 kilowatt battery, the 9 kilowatt motor, but putting it into this body style. Okay, we'll talk a bit about the sort of rear end of this bike a bit later, but as you can see, they are different in terms of design and size. Okay, so one of the differences being that on the S02 you have smaller front wheels, or smaller wheels in general. Okay, and also these are not Pirelli based. Okay, which I've talked about before. It was refreshing to see a Pirelli tyre on some of these bikes, because most of the time you're seeing Chinese brands. But as you can see, this is a 13-inch wheel, and that was 15. So what they're basically doing is making a smaller form factor. At the back, it's a 12-inch wheel. Okay, so it's not unusual to have this split sizes of wheels as Super Socko CPX does it, and basically what they're doing is allowing for maybe travel of the brakes and the suspension, or allowing more space for things like storage and what goes under the seat. Okay, so wouldn't be too worried about it, other than the fact that you've obviously got to get a mix of tyres when you replace them. Okay, but other than that, it's fine. Okay. One of the consequences of having smaller wheels is obviously that the ride height is different. So you might not get that from this angle, but the bike is lower. Okay. I guess one of the other advantages of having a battery under the seat and not under the floor like some other bikes is that you don't seem to have the problem of how high your knees come. Okay, so We'll show you that in a minute. Okay, so going around the bike a bit more, this is just design, showing you that it's a Silence bike, rear disc brakes, and you can check the fluid levels in them here and here. You could even top that up yourself if you wanted. Okay, as you can see from the seat, it is basically a platform that is made for different options. Okay, so there are some bikes that are set up like this, where by default you might have a single seat, and then this area here is interchangeable. Okay, so NIU, for example, their cargo bike, that only has one seat, and then this area is for a top box. On the NIU it's not as big, but it's all about keeping the centre of gravity as far forward as possible for when you put that load. Okay, so this bike can carry quite a lot. It's 282 kilos of total load. Okay, interestingly, the S01 actually has a bit more, but this might be a consequence of the power that the S01 has. Okay, so sorry, the S01 has more power, 9 kilowatts max. This motor on this version, so this is the low speed version, not the 60 mile an hour version, is 1.5 kilowatts. Okay, 1.5 kilowatts is not anything near the 9 kilowatts max of the S01. Okay, so 1.5 kilowatts is actually only 2 horsepower. But we've talked about this before, that people will compare that to a petrol bike and think, well, that's nothing. You know, my petrol bike has, 10, 20, 30. But you have to remember on the efficiency of these motors. Okay, so the efficiency on this motor is probably about 80 odd, 90%. As in, out of that 2 horsepower, you're actually getting about 1.7 horsepower to the wheel. Okay, but on petrol bikes, you're losing 70%, or you're actually only achieving 30%. Okay, so if you had a 20 horsepower petrol bike, you're only probably getting about 6 horsepower to the wheel. Okay, so it's not really an apples to apples comparison to compare horsepower. Okay, because you have to include efficiency. Okay, so that's why you see a lot of these bikes that have, if you did that, you would say, the horsepower will not, get me up a hill or take a big load, but it's all down to the efficiency, which is one of the other advantages of electric bikes in general. Okay, so as you can see, it's a slight difference at the back end. So there's a single swing arm on the S01. Okay, so nothing here. That can aid with easy removal of the rear wheel for changing tyres, for example. This one is a bit more traditional, so you have dual springs, and as you can see, here's the cable that's basically going directly into the hub, and when you change the tyres, you actually have to follow this through and disconnect it from the controller to allow you to take off the rear wheel. Okay, so something to remember. So while we're down here, let's look at things like it's got obviously pegs for the rear passenger, and it's also here, you can see it's got a lock, and that is to lock the battery into place. Okay, so obviously these things are quite expensive. They're quite a large proportion of the cost of the bike. So they've thought about that, and a separate lock for letting the battery be kept securely. Interestingly, although there's a hole for it, there isn't one on the S01. Not too sure why that is. Okay, but we'll come back to that. When you look at storage, you will see that there isn't any, essentially. Okay, so you basically get a cover actually with Silence in the UK, so that's a good breakdown cover. And this is all you need. There is no charger required because the charger's built into the battery. It's a kettle lead. You can make it longer if you wanted to have a long one for wherever you place the vehicle. And underneath here, you see this little catch, and that undoes the battery, and then you put it out. Okay. I'm not going to do that because I want to show you the bike on. But the net result is obviously that the battery comes out. These little wheels come out underneath it, and then you can roll it around. Okay. So this battery for the S02 low speed as in not long range, is 2 kilowatt hours. Okay, as we said at the beginning, this battery is 5.6 kilowatt hours. Okay, so nearly 3 times the ability to drive the bike. Okay, so hence range. Okay, so what they've done is created the ability to put essentially that battery in this bike, and that then becomes the S02 low speed long range. Okay, still the 28 mile an hour version. On the S02 high speed, you just get one of those. There'll be no reason to put a 2 kilowatt hour battery into the 60 mile an hour bike. Your mileage would go down to like 10 miles or something. So that is how they make their models. So the S02 high speed, the 62 mile an hour one, 9 kilowatts, as in the same motor as this, with that battery. The S02 low speed is 1.5 kilowatt motor with a 2 kilowatt hour battery. And then the S02 low speed long range is the same, but with that battery. Okay. And you could mix and match your fleet if you wanted, obviously, because they are interchangeable. Okay. Right, so let me just look around the bike when it's on. So interestingly, I have to say that there is this mechanism around here to lock this little hole. So I don't know if you've seen this. So basically what you do is you put this in and close the little latch. Okay, so you can't get into the bike anymore, and then you have to match up this. Now, the only other bikes I've seen these on are not European. In other words, they're Chinese. So maybe that is a component that's come from China. As I've always said, I can't imagine any vehicle these days not having something Chinese in it, but that is certainly something I've seen before on Chinese bikes. Next to it you have dual USB. Okay, so see for your phone. This is a phone mount. This is actually an option. It's about £20 more, and obviously to hold your phone. So the other interesting thing you notice about this bike is, as you can see here on the dashboard, it says 98% fully charged, range 21. So that might cause a few raised eyebrows, because that is not a lot. I mean, there are bikes that are like the NIU UQI Pro, the entry-level NIU, that is 1.3 kilowatts, or 1.2 kilowatts actually, that is doing about that. So I am quite surprised if that is the real range. And in fact, it isn't when you ride it around. So yesterday we did 13 miles on it, and there was still 60% left on the battery. Okay, so it's not, I guess, an accurate reflection, because I'll be very surprised if it only does 20 miles. In fact, I'm pretty sure it will do more than that. Okay, but the way it works is, here is the out, as you can see there, and there is the in, so that's regen. Okay, and 98%, it's got 2 modes, so there's modes here, city and eco. Okay, so one thing you do notice about this bike that you have to be aware of is that there's a slight delay between when you press the mode choice and it actually engaging. Okay, so what happens is, okay, it's pretty hard to do this on a stand, but see, it says eco mode gives you 19 miles an hour. If I then press the mode button, 1, 2, 3, and then it engages. Okay. Also, what you notice is you can't go back down if you're doing full speed in city mode. So this is a trait of a Silence, that they let you engage certain gears only at the appropriate time, or modes I should say. Other bikes will let you go into that mode, but then you'll just essentially coast down to the speed that that mode can actually deal with. Okay, but in Silence, the mode is sort of restricted from you. You see, I am actually pressing the mode button now, and nothing's happening. Okay, but when I slow down, or I can start with eco mode and obviously go up, and I can go down while I'm still doing 19 miles an hour, because that is a speed that the eco mode can handle. Okay, but if I then accelerate, I can't. Okay, so it's just something to be aware of on this bike. Okay, not a problem, it's just the way it works. Okay, so underneath here you have an info button, and that's giving you information like trip counters, odometer, temperature of the inverter. We didn't mention that, but these batteries can have an inverter, which means you can use the battery to charge other things. Okay, so you could get an inverter and then plug your laptop into it and power your laptop from the battery. Okay, but I haven't heard particularly a demand for that, but it is something that you can do. It's probably good for camping and things like that, if that's what you're doing. So around the dash, the rest of it is fairly standard. So you've got hazard lights. You'll be glad to know that they make noise. Indicators on this side, and passing light and horn and stuff like that. So pretty standard. As I said, around the front here, you've got a dual USB port. You've got a hook for a bag. You also have the ability to buy an actual storage bag for this area. Okay, so it actually fits between the seat. One thing that you will notice actually is if you compare the foot space, you have a little bit more than you do on the S01, and that's really down to the fact that they've just designed it because they want to give you this big seat, and hence big storage. There's a bit more space. Okay, all right. One other thing here is that this part allows you to actually adjust when the brakes bite. Okay, so it's quite a good thing. So if your brakes are not biting as much as you like, you can tighten the little setting there, and then your brakes will then start being more reactive. Okay, so quite a good feature. No other bikes that we do have that. Okay, then onto the back. So as I said, this is a sort of a platform. As you can see, it already comes with hooks, handles for the rear passenger, but this is essentially an option. Okay, so you get the bike and then you say, okay, well, I want the rear passenger seat. Then they are sort of assuming that you're going to add a top box here with a pad on it for the passenger. Okay, I guess it would look a bit strange if it didn't, but essentially the point of the platform is that, okay, you don't have that, and then you can have, they actually can supply over a 300 litre top box. So 300 litres is enough to get a person in it. That's how big 300 litres is. So as I said, this is clearly a platform that they're going to use for delivery, okay, delivery tasks. All right. I would expect that if you were to do that, you certainly would have the long range battery option, which, because obviously 20 miles on a shift, and you wouldn't be having spare batteries of these lying around. Even though they take 4 hours to charge, buying a spare battery would be quite a significant investment. Okay, so I would imagine that for real delivery tasks, you're going to have the low speed, long range, i.e. this bike with this battery. Okay, so prices. So this bike as it is now, so the low speed version is 2695. Okay, if you wanted to add the long range battery, so an S02 LS LR, that's 3595. Okay, so 3595 is actually £1 less than that. Right, so the NQI GTS Pro, basically from NIU. Okay, but this on paper will have more range because it's got a WMTC rating of 90 miles. Okay, so it is quite an interesting proposition when you compare it to an NQI GTS Pro, for example. If you were turning that into a delivery, or an NQI GTS Cargo is actually more. Okay, but that is a 125cc equivalent. Okay, so in cities where speed limits are limited, or you don't particularly want your riders whizzing around at 50 miles an hour getting speeding tickets, etc., so you only want a 28 mile an hour bike and you want long range, 3595 isn't so bad. And you also have to remember that it is on the grant. Okay, so this is the price after the grant. Okay, so it's actually about 800 odd pounds more to actually buy this bike if it wasn't on the grant. Okay. The way the grant works is that there would still be VAT showed on the invoice, so you could get the 20% off from the OZEV grant and then VAT back too. Okay, so it is an interesting option for delivery. Okay, and of course, if you were to then say, well, I want a mixed fleet of the short range and long range version, and maybe the high speed version, and maybe the S01, you should have this interchangeability between them in terms of batteries at least. Okay, so just to wrap up, colours, so there's this grey, there is a white and a green. I said yesterday on the ride review that there was a black. I'm now not too sure about that. I will have to check, but I think this is now the sort of darker colour that you can get. Obviously branding is perfectly possible, you could wrap them, etc, etc. All right, so hopefully that's given you some information about these bikes, and obviously if you want to come and have a test ride, then you're more than welcome in Southwest London. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at hello@green-mopeds.com. And thanks very much.